Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. Hi, welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella, and thank you for joining me today. I'm just going to talk directly to you in regard to nature. Instead of us having an interview, I want to have a one-way conversation with you to talk a little bit about how nature impacts us and how we can use our relationship with our environment to help with the healing process of grief and trauma. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to this in the first place. My whole dissertation was written on the use of nature-based rituals with people who were grieving. One of the things that began to emerge was an awareness of just how impactful it is to get ourselves back into the natural environment and why that becomes a healing opportunity that's different than what you're going to see in therapy. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. So the dissertation was the use of nature-based rituals for adult surviving siblings. And so here we are. We're going to talk about that. So what is it about nature? I'm going to tell you a story. It's a little bit of some research that's going on out there. It's based on this book called The Biophilia Effect and another one called Nature Fix. In Japan, there's not a whole lot of forests, and they were noticing that there was a lot of stress, obviously, with people who were living in the cities. So they began to do this thing called forest bathing. They planted forests in the city, and they would encourage their employees during their breaks to go out into those forests in order to bring a peace and calm to their lives and then to be able to go back to work. But here's some interesting research. So they take a group of people, they take their cortisol levels, they take their blood pressure, their pulse ox, they take their heart rates, and they take this group of people and they put them out in the woods for a half an hour and they bring them back, and what do you expect would happen? All their numbers went down, right? Their whole fight, flight, freeze, or feign dead nervous system chilled out. It's called our parasympathetic nervous system. That's the thing that chills us out after we've gotten really activated when, maybe we feel like we're in danger. So they came back calmer. They did the same thing with the same group of people, but put them into the city. And then when they came back, all of their numbers were elevated, meaning they became more stressed out. They became less connected to their sense of calm and peace. So how is this related to grief? How is this related to trauma? Well, think about this. When you are in a traumatic state, when you're in a grieving place, trying to find places where you can calm yourself can be very challenging, right? So here you are now trying to figure out, how am I going to take care of myself? And you hear people talk about coping skills all the time. So coping skills, okay, you want to make sure you eat well, that you sleep, that you exercise. I was just having a conversation with somebody about this, about making sure that we are taking care of our basic needs. But what about getting out into nature? Do you think maybe that could be a basic need as well? Research shows that it is. We are actually, check this out, we are actually biologically inclined to, we have receptors on the cells of our brains. The cells of our brains are called neurons. There are receptors on those cells in our brains that connect to certain chemicals that trees and soil emit. We are actually part of the natural environment, so much so that our brain chemistry demonstrates that we are completely connected, like lock and key connected to the natural environment. So when we go out into the natural environment, it's a sense of compatibility that we're not having when we go out into, the natural environment. It's the sense of just being able to get away and have a sense of being able to ponder other things when we're away from man-made objects, which are called like, what do you call them? hard objects. So hard objects are objects that are, I'm looking out the windows like you guys can see what the hell I'm looking at. I'm looking at windows. Hard objects are objects that are made by man. Soft objects are objects that are from nature that are, they hold your attention, but they don't distract your attention, which again gives you an opportunity to ponder other things without being drawn, your attention being drawn away. So you can start thinking about the healing process and ways that you're taking care of yourself, and the ways that how you want to integrate this loss into your story of your life. A couple of other things that are really important to take into consideration. When I'm out in nature, it's not judgmental. I might be the best therapist on the planet, and by the way, I am, but and I don't even know what to say. If I could be the best therapist on the planet, but you can't tell me that at some point you're not thinking, I wonder what she's thinking. And you're right, that'd be a natural question to ask yourself. But when you're out in nature, nature doesn't judge. There's a sense of freedom that comes with being out in nature, because you don't have to worry about anybody judging you. You can be your authentic self and be open and engaged with only yourself, without having to worry about another person passing, having any kind of thoughts about, your process or the things that you want to express. Nature naturally brings a sense of mindfulness. You hear your therapist, if you haven't already, or your friends, or you have found or talked about developing mindfulness because of its ability to help you become less reactive and become more responsive. What I mean by that is, everybody has things that happen to them. So like, let's say these are things that happen to them. Let's say this is loss, and this is the person, right? That's going to happen. Can't change that. Things are going to happen. Over here, if you go in this direction, where you become reactive, where you don't think about what's going on, you're not mindful about what's happening in your body, your tendency is to go into this automatic reaction mode, which means you're not thinking about what's going on, and it cascades, and it begins to get your sympathetic nervous system going, which means that whole fight, flight, or freeze response going. And then it can cascade into your body, and you can have chronic illnesses, and it just goes on and on and on, and mental illness. And all that because you're reactive, and you're not thinking about why you're reacting to what you're reacting to. Over here, we have becoming responsive. That means right at that moment, you go, ooh, huh, what's going on here? Well, I just noticed in my body that I feel tight in the chest, and I'm noticing I'm breathing heavier. I wonder what that means. And in so many words, what that means is that your body is telling you that there's something to worry about, but your mind at that time, you're able to say, no, not really. There's nothing to worry about here. You're not in danger. So that moment becomes a wedge of awareness. And that wedge of awareness provides you opportunity to make choices. And if you're able to make choices, you can choose whether or not you want to cascade down, or if you maybe want to employ some type of coping skill so that you are able to adjust accordingly. For example, breathing more effectively, or calling up a friend, or sitting quietly. So all of these things become available to you when you are out in the natural, environment. So that becomes a very positive, powerful way of nature providing you opportunity for that. So what do I mean by nature-based rituals? All right, well, let me explain this to you. When we're talking about ritual, we're talking about being able to create an opportunity to find space to express yourself in a contained environment. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Okay, when we go to have a ritual, let's say we're having a ritual like for a funeral. All right. When you think of a funeral, there's step-by-step processes that happen with a funeral, right? We usually have a viewing, Then everybody goes up, we shake their hand, I'm so sorry for your loss, blah, blah, blah. Then they go out and they have the burial, and there's a whole religious ceremony sometimes along the process of that. And then you have the, afterwards you have the wake where everybody gets together and they eat their food. And so then we end up with this whole process of, we know what to expect in all of this, right? So if you know what the steps are that you're supposed to be taking during this period of time, it becomes a ritual. It becomes something that you're prepared for. You may not know all of the details that happen in the ritual itself, but you know what to expect in this container. You have to figure out what exactly your intention is. So is your ritual going to be one of intention of separation or one of reconnection? So maybe if I'm saying it's a ritual of separation, for example, is me being able to say goodbye to the person that I loved. There's my ritual of separation, all right? So if that's my ritual and that's my intention, then my intention then is going to include activities in the ritual that represent separation. Now, you have to have intention. If you don't have intention, you don't have a ritual, you have a habit. I'll give you an example. Let's say you walk into church and you're Catholic, right? And you cross yourself when you walk into church. If you don't think about why you're doing that, that's not a ritual, that's a habit. We're not looking for habits, you're looking for intention. So if my intention is one of separation, everything I do in this ritual in a natural environment, which has a natural proclivity to facilitate the process, it all has to lend itself to doing so, okay? All right, so that's step one. You find your intention. Step two is, what kinds of things do I need to do in order to symbolize separation? So an example of that might be, and I don't suggest, releasing balloons into the air because it's not good for the environment, but I'm going to give it to you as an example anyway. Maybe one of your symbols in your life that are important are red balloons, because you remember in 4th grade your parents had a birthday party, and in the birthday party they used red balloons. So red balloons symbolizes something for you, not just because it's a red balloon, but because it links you to the person that you have lost. The intention of that symbol has to be meaningful. I hope that makes sense. So once you have the meaningful symbol, and I'm really simplifying this, but you have this meaningful symbol of the red balloon, then you decide, okay, what am I going to do with the red balloon? I am going to symbolize separating from the loss of my father by writing a note to my dad, tying it to a little piece of paper, and then letting go of the red balloon, which symbolizes separating from my dad. What are the steps that I need to take in order to get there? Well, I need to, first I have to write the letter. I'm going to write that the night before. After I write the letter, I'm going to make sure I have the balloon, and you write it's step by step approach on how exactly I want to, what steps I want to take into the ritual. All right. Once you have the steps, put together, then you are, your next step is to start thinking about where you're going to do this. The point of a nature-based ritual is to be in a location that is quiet, away from man-made objects, for all the reasons that I talked to you about before. You're able to leave behind daily tasks. You feel compatible with nature at wherever you're at. You feel that you have this proclivity to feel soothed by the natural environment and to be able to feel mindful. And you want to make sure that the place that you decide to do this makes you feel that way. So then you've picked your place. Now you've got to ask yourself, is there a particular time? Well, I think I'm going to take the day that my father died and use that as being specifically a time. See how every single thing you do is intentional. You go out, you do your ritual, you perform your ritual, and after you perform your ritual, you come back and then you can process your ritual. So I'm going to give you an example. Out of all of that stuff, I'm going to give you the example that I give when I start talking about my brother. So back when I lived in California after all of this, I my rituals were rather complicated because God forbid I do anything simple. And my brother Damien never traveled. So in my mind, one of the things that was very important in the nature-based rituals I did for him was always to take him to a different place. Always to take him to a different space, because if I did that, that meant he was traveling. So this is what my rituals got a little complicated, but that's all right. The very first thing I would do is I would pick the place where I was going to take him. I knew that it was going to be a ritual of connection, not a ritual of separation. I'd already separated from him. My brother died on Christmas Day in 1999. So I knew that it was going to be a ritual of reconnection. Now, I also knew that it was going to be a ritual. It was going to have a lot of symbolism to it because, again, God forbid I do anything simple. So when we were kids, we, you know, what do I want to say? We weren't very, we didn't have a whole lot of money. But once in a while, my mom would come home with a box of brownie mix. And I remember as a kid, I'd be sitting there making brownies. She'd let me be the one to stir it. And I'd be making brownies, and he would come over and stick his fat ass finger in the brownie batter. And then I have to go chase him around so we could fight about it. And then it became this area, you know, this thing of contention between the two of us. Well, after Damien died, I had some pretty significant dreams. And one of the dreams I had was I was standing at the stove of my house, and I'm stirring brownie batter, and he's on my right-hand side, and he stuck his fat-ass finger in my brownie batter, and I got mad really, really quick, just like I did when I was a kid, and then I started laughing, and I pushed him. I've told this story before. If you look at, why am I pointing to all the cameras? If you watch my videos of my personal story, I tell this story. But I pushed him, I don't know, right with my arm, right with my elbow, and started laughing. And in that moment, it's going to get me choked up. It always does every time I tell the damn story. And in this moment, I had a beautiful reparative experience that I wish I would have had when he was alive. So brownies have a lot of meaning for me. They represent my relationship with him. They represent the complexity of our relationship. They represented our past. They represented opportunity of reconnection. So every Christmas Eve, and to this day, and it's getting ready to be, 24 years, every single Christmas Eve, I make brownies. Every Christmas Eve, I make brownies. And so the morning of Christmas, I get up. I wouldn't talk. I wouldn't talk because it represented the fact that he can't talk. I packed my bag the night before with brownies, with a thing of sage, because for smudging, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but with smudging, a journal that I wrote with once a year, a lunch, and I'm pretty sure that's all I would bring with me. So I think that was it. So then I would jump in my car and I would play Metallica, and I played Metallica because that was my brother's favorite band. I was not a huge fan of Metallica at the time. I am more so now. There's a couple songs I really, really like, but I'll tell you, on my way, listening to Metallica. So I'd already scouted out where I was going to go. Every year I'd scout out a different place. So let's say I went over here, over to this place called Daly Ranch. Okay, whatever. Went over there, hiked up to where I was going to do the ritual, put rocks in the 4 cardinal directions, and ended up smudging the area to make it nice and clean. And when I stepped into the circle, that was me stepping into my ritual space. Now I've separated out from the world anything that was, drawing me away from my ritual, right? This is now my quiet ritual space. So I would go into the space, I would sit down, I would write in the journal, of all the things that happened over the year, and my thoughts and my feelings about him being gone. I would eat my lunch. I would throw his lunch out on the ground. I would eat my brownie. I'd throw his brownie out on the ground. Got a lot of fat squirrels running around in San Diego somewhere. And then I'd sit in silence and be with the mindfulness, be with nature, be connected as a result of the ability to sit in silence. After I sat in silence for a while, I'd pick up all my stuff. I would, move everything, back the way I found it. I'd get back into the car. I'd play Metallica again. I would drive home, and I would take a shower. And I took a shower. It was like a baptism. Now I can go about Christmas. Now I can go about Christmas. I needed something to contain it so that Christmas didn't suck every single year. I had the day. I knew every year when I was going to do it. I knew it was going to be in the morning. I knew it had to be on the day that he died. I knew the steps I needed to take in order to feel like everything was contained, and to feel like I knew what the next step was. And it cut through my ability to just intellectualize my way through the experience. It made me have to do something to engage in the experience, as opposed to just thinking my way through the experience. And so in that way, I was able to say, okay, here's my loss. I can see my loss. I'm not so far away from it that I'm not engaged with it, but I'm not so close to it that I'm swallowed up with it. It allowed me to process it and made me feel reconnected to him. And now over the years, my ritual has changed over time. It's a lot more simple now. And so that's the ritual I've done every single year. Now, again, my ritual now, I still do the brownies, but now I have a family. And so I have his picture, and we just light a candle and light a candle from my husband's mom, and we have the brownie out there. And it's the only time my stepsons will not steal the brownies is when that brownie's in front of my brother, because they know I'll throttle them, and it'll be not good for their well-being. And so they just stay away from that brownie. I'm like, yeah. I don't know about you, but when I go out into nature, if you've ever done forest bathing, it's really, really fantastic. I don't know if you've ever done forest bathing, but it is very different than just going for a hike. When you go out, you are so intentionally connected to everything around you. You're fully immersed in the experience of the trees and the colors and the critters. And I mean, I remember I went to this one, forest bathing class, and when I went, she's like, okay, you see all the different colors of green? Yeah. Pick a color of green and make that happen. Make it happen that you pick a name for that color green. And it's like, make that happen. What the heck does she mean by that? And she's like, it is your opportunity to create something that maybe you're not going to find in a Crayola box. So make that experience happen for you. So it's very experiential, and you're engaged in it. So there is these nature-based rituals. They can be very powerful. They can be very helpful, and they can be private. And you don't have to share them with anybody, but you're able to go out and have the experience of reconnecting to that which is bigger than yourself. Some people find their religion in the spirit, in the natural world. That's where my religion is. That's where my higher power is. Other people find it in, church or synagogues or other kinds of temples. But for me, that's where my higher power is. So when I'm out in nature, I'm connected to the numinous, that which is bigger than myself. I might have peak experiences where I come to these insights I wouldn't necessarily have. People can do that in all different kinds of locations. But nature does facilitate that process very seamlessly. And so using nature, getting yourself out there, it does give you that, your body's opportunity to help you as you're trying to come to terms with the reality of a loss, and to try to remember how to move forward with processing your pain and putting it in a narrative that perhaps that you weren't seeing before. Perhaps it wasn't part of your narrative before. So trying to figure out if there's something else I want to tell you about nature. There's so much about nature out there that I could share with you, but in terms of grief and trauma, I think there's a lot there. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to have some, I don't know, thoughts of your own about how you might be able to get outside and experience water, experience nature, and see if that provides you any healing opportunities. So give it a try. See if nature works for you. See if ritual works for you. And thank you for listening with Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who is experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.